Hello and welcome to I'm Already Sad, so let's talk about more sad stuff because mental health. I'm your host Lilac. We're just gonna get into it. Today we're gonna be talking about 8 Passengers mama, why'd I say that? 8 Passengers mom, Ruby Franke. And I was gonna talk about the Quiet on the Set documentary with Dan Schneider and everything, but honestly, I don't know if I can handle the back-to-back of two really dark topics. I don't know if I'm mentally in the mood for it, but if I can get to a little bit at the end, I sure will. So, Ruby Franke is the mom of the now disgraced 8 Passengers YouTube channel. It was a family vlogging channel, which is already a red flag because all the family vlogging channels never seem to go well. It's all exploitation, no good. And she was the steroids level of exploitation. She was already pretty concerning on her own. She would upload videos like, oh, my 4-year-old forgot to bring her lunch. And the school called and said, hey, she needs to eat. And Ruby Franke would be like, no, she doesn't. Basically, that's her responsibility as a 4-year-old to figure it out. And if she forgot her lunch, then I guess she doesn't eat. So that's the kind of mom that we started with. Okay. And we were all already like, that's not okay. But then it just kept escalating and escalating and escalating to more abusive and horrendous territory, especially when she met disgraced therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever, Jodi Hildebrandt. So Jodi and Ruby were kind of just a recipe for disaster, honestly. And they started this program called Connections, where they had the audacity to give parenting advice. And essentially, the advice was just your child deserves to suffer. And if they're not suffering, you're not parenting correctly. They shouldn't have fun. They shouldn't laugh. They shouldn't giggle. They shouldn't be themselves. They shouldn't do things they enjoy. They should basically just be little slaves. That was their advice. All of this kind of escalated on a gradual path when their oldest daughter, Sherry, moved out and it was clear that she was against the family. Ruby's own sisters, brothers, parents were against Connections and her lifestyle choices. But then her 2 children that are still living with her or were living with her at the time, whose names have since been redacted in the media, so they're just known as R and E. One morning, R broke out of the house and ran to a neighbor's house. He was emaciated. It was clear he was unwell. The neighbors called the police. And from that point, I almost said Ruby and Jodi were arrested for child mistreatment. And oh yeah, obviously TW for child mistreatment. Since then, they pled guilty. They have a sentence of, the exact time hasn't been determined, but it was 4 counts of child mistreatment. Each count has up to 1 to 15 years per count. So they could serve anywhere from 4 years to 60 years. I think the max someone said they could actually serve was 30, but let's be honest, they're probably going to serve 4. And things have just been kind of in a lull from there. But now we recently have some more evidence that's been coming out, and that evidence includes pictures, and it also includes a phone call from Ruby to her now ex-husband and Ruby's own journal entries. First and foremost, don't look at the pictures, okay? They are out there. I would not suggest looking at them. They're very graphic. They're a lot worse than I thought. When they had wounds, she would put cayenne pepper and honey on them and bind them with saran wrap and duct tape. Now, R had a wound on his shin, which she continued to put this concoction onto until the skin basically rotted away. There's a picture where you can basically fully see into his leg and his skin is falling off. In addition to that, she would have them be outside for whole days and nights with no food, no water, because she claimed that they were demon spawn and they were possessed and they didn't need food and water. And she would say things like, well, I'll get into the journal entries, but what you need to know is the physical portion of the mistreatment was a lot worse than I think we all were prepared for. And if you haven't been following the case, in Ruby's sentencing, she was bawling, crying, saying that she's had a change of heart and she's a better person now and she was brainwashed, which she wasn't, because she was this bad before she met Jodi. But also, now that we are seeing the extent of the injuries, that's not a change of heart type thing. I don't think mistreatment is ever like oops, never mind, I changed my mind and now I'm a good person. But it's worse than I thought. Please be careful if you're a curious person like I am when looking at these pictures. They are bad. Okay, they're very graphic. You honestly just shouldn't even look at them. They're very sad and disturbing. And in these pictures, it also details her daughter, E. They found her in a closet with her head shaved, both really emaciated, skin and bone for real. It's just terrible. But as for the prison phone call, it's about as bad as you would think. For one, we have Kevin, the ex-husband, who I'm not sure why he didn't also have charges pressed against him, because he was for sure complacent in this at the very least. Kevin is like, hey, we support you. We're going to be there for you, which I don't understand how he and her parents could support her after this. I'm assuming the parents must be terrible as well. But her response to that is, am I on the news? Is this on the news?
I just wanted you to know I'm thinking about you, and if I can ever be a resource, we are always here.
Are we in the news?
It sounds like at least you're in the news. I don't know about me. I don't know what he's talking about. But.
Like, girl, that should be the last thing you're thinking about. On that phone call, they're talking about the kids. She's just so self-centered and obviously mentally unwell, but saying, oh, they had to bring the kids to the hospital for like 3 days. That's so weird, quote, and unnecessary. There's a hole in your son's leg, a literal rotting hole in his leg, and they are skin and bones. For you to say it's weird and unnecessary, you know what else is weird and unnecessary? The fact that y'all put them in the hospital to begin with. She also says something that gets redacted, which I'm sure will come out later. The kicker is, she says, adults have a really hard time understanding that kids are full of evil.
What? So I think I was prepared for this. I do feel strong.
Mm-hmm.
I feel calm. And you know what? Adults have a really hard time understanding that children can be full of evil and what that takes to fight it.
So you just had that tearful BS speech about how you're so regretful. You were supposed to be a mother to your children and you ended up being a dark force or whatever, and you've had a change of heart and you feel so terrible. But behind the scenes, you're still blaming the kids. You're still blaming the victims by saying, well, adults just don't know that kids are full of evil. Ma'am, please, I don't understand you. So let's read some of her disgusting journal entries. So this is 3 months worth of journal entries. I'm sure there's more that will be brought up in court, but basically, Ruby Franke was saying that the kids were in a training program because she thought they were possessed to remove the evil from them. Her daughter is 9, her son is 12. She describes them as spawns of Satan. So off to a good start. She described her program as an intervention for the possessed. I hate to tell you, but the only possessed one seems like you. So this is just saying that the program consisted of long periods of exposure to the elements, forcing them to be outside. I think the son had 3rd-degree burns, and she was pouring old mop water on them. She even held the son's head in pool water and held his mouth and nose shut so he couldn't breathe. When the kids didn't want to go outside, she would use a cactus poker to force them back into the sun. And when the children complained about the heat, she would say, well, it's not as hot as the heat in hell, which is where her kids would go burn. So Mother of the Year over here. She also didn't give them water. And when the kids would go steal water, she would write, they were stealing water. They don't even have any remorse. They just lie to my face about water. And she excused the no food and water by saying that she was inviting them to be humble. Ma'am, I think you might need to go through some of that humbling yourself. Okay? And she also qualified that by saying that she refuses to feed a demon. She shaved the younger daughter's hair. I'm not really sure why. All she put in her journal is all her long hair is gone. No more distracting with hair. She would make them go up and down the stairs carrying boxes for hours, saying that good work needs to be painful. Okay, where's your good work? What are you doing? Where's your good painful work? Because it doesn't seem like you're doing much of it. I think you actually may need to be put in a humbling program. She also would make the kids stay in a closet, and they were to be completely silent, no noise making whatsoever. And they were in these closets in isolation for so long that they would lose track of time. But the son was able to remember that his birthday had passed, which he then got punished for counting the days. The daughter was also counting the days, and Ruby asked her if she felt like she was making any progress. The child said yes, and Ruby Franke said she's delusional. They would put them in the closet often. There was a time where Jodi carried her back in the closet. She was kicking, screaming, and asking for water her, which was refused. Now, this part's really disturbing as well, but there's several entries that talked about her sedating the children. I'm not really sure what that means or what she used to do that, but that's pretty freaking despicable. And if they started kicking and screaming to be let out of the closet, she would put on boots and go kick them. She would also make them sleep on a concrete floor while bragging that she's sleeping in a nice bed. A bed, by the way, in a house, by the way, that was paid for essentially by her kids. Because let's be real, when you're a family vlogger, nobody's paying to see you. They're paying to see your kids, which is already weird in and of itself, but all that money that you're making and throwing in their face technically belongs to them. So the audaciousness is a little ridiculous to me. So R, the kid that ended up running out to get help, that wasn't the first time that he had run away. He ran away once before, and Jodi and Ruby unfortunately ended up finding him, and she wrote in her journal that it was a miracle that they found him because the devil wants her in prison. Following his escape attempt, she put him back in the closet, and whenever he was out of the closet, she would physically handcuff him to her so he couldn't go anywhere. She also hog-tied him, so tied his hands together, his feet together, and then tied both his hands and feet together. So he's basically like in this position for I don't even know how long, but he had really deep lacerations in his hands and his feet because of the ropes cutting into him, which she would then put that cayenne pepper into, which got infected. She said that he was full of evil puffy infection. I think you're an evil puffy infection, ma'am. This is where it really gets grim. Basically, Franke said that her and Jodi Hildebrandt were buying time until they could move away from Ivins, Utah, which was not conducive to the intervention. She planned to move them to a spot in Arizona that was very deserted. And she said, while the children believed that once the training was over, they would be able to return to their home in Springville in northern Utah, Franke wrote they had different plans for the children. They are, quote, never going home. So now this is where I've said in my past videos, she very much gives me Lori Vallow. And if you aren't aware of Lori Vallow was someone that was, I don't want to say brainwashed, I feel like that's such a cop-out, but was indoctrinated in a CULT, a very religious one, a very alarmist one, and she ended up, unfortunately, unaliving her 2 children. And everybody's saying that this is giving very similar vibes because Ruby is very religiously intense, and this is sounding like her ultimate plan was to unalive them. I mean, by the time they were found, they were so malnourished, they were basically to the brink of being unalived already. And this journal entry kind of solidified that she was going to end these children, which is so freaking scary and honestly incredible that R was able to get help. I don't even know how he was able to walk on that leg, but thank goodness he was able to. This is just talking about how she wanted to move them to open Arizona with open land and that it needed to happen sooner than later. She said they decided the escalation of the kids is not manageable, whatever that means. She went on to write they needed enough property to build a ranch where good can be done, where the kids could experience natural outcomes. She then followed that with the kids need a good kick from a horse or a cactus to run into. If you hate your kids, why do you keep having them? You had like 8. It's literally 8 passengers, so the 2 parents and 6 kids. You had 6 kids. Why? If you don't even like kids. What's the point? To be cash cows, that's the point. She also said that in Arizona, she would intend on making sure they did not get to enjoy air conditioning or other amenities. She said, quote, we will drop them like hot potatoes out in the desert, their new home, which again solidifies the plan that she was planning to unalive them. She was going to drop them in the middle of nowhere in the heat of the desert, already malnourished and on the brink of not being alive, and just leave them there. For doing what? Nothing. She would also make them do little challenges like asking them to balance on one foot. One child fell over and hit his nose on the ground and began bleeding. And she's saying that God knew she would take her responsibility to mother them seriously because they were extremely possessed and it was up to her to fix it. That's mainly the extent of her journal entries. Very freaking disturbing. If I find any more parts of the phone call that are disturbing, I will put them in, but I think I covered the main bits. Their interrogation and arrests aren't really all that special. I mean, Ruby's just straight up refusing to talk, so she's not really saying anything. And Jodi is acting like, I'm a psychologist. I know exactly what police are going to do. You're going to twist my words. I'm so smart. Are you?
I know, and I'd love to tell you if he were here, because I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with what I say. You know, I'm a psychologist. I've watched people flip things all the time. So I get it. I sit on your side. I get it. I wish people didn't do that, but they do.
And Jodi was already on the phone with her attorney while she was arrested, so take that for what you will. It's just a mess. Allegedly, Ruby Franke is expressing remorse behind bars, which give her an Oscar because it's fake. But Jodi, on the other hand, is basically saying, I don't care, I did what I did. And I don't know if that's better or worse. I don't know if it's better to just be your true evil self and not even try to feign care, or if it just makes you even more egregious. Really can't say, but I can say I don't think that the kids should be with Kevin either. Obviously, I don't think foster care is amazing either, so it's just like a shit show from all directions. Okay, I'm coming in for an update, and I gotta be really quiet because not everyone in this house is a psycho that films at 2 a.m. Okay, I'm trying to be somebody out here, so what can you do? An interview with Kevin has come out. And it's real interesting. If you've seen any of my previous videos on Ruby Franke, you know that I have said or speculated that her and Jodi were in a romantic relationship. Now, I know people are like, what? They're Mormons. That doesn't make sense. It's against everything they believe in. Yeah. Shut up. Because listen to this. Not only when they talk do you see like the chemistry kind of, but this fucking shit is so weird. I swear the story gets so crazy by the day. So apparently Ruby was a fan of Jodi before she met her because one of Ruby's friends was a fan of Jodi. So by the time that she met her, she was like fangirling, I guess. Ew. And at the time, Ruby found out that Jodi was living in one of the houses of her clients. What in the unethical conflict of interest? Imagine your therapist living with you. How fucking weird. I love therapy. I wish I could go to therapy more, but it's hella expensive. So you should subscribe so your girl can afford therapy. However, even if I was like massively rich, like rich enough to have my therapist live, I guess, near me, number one, it would be in like a guest house. It would not be in my house. And even so, I would fear that that would change the relationship between me and my therapist because I would be providing them with luxury items. And even if me having my therapist on my property didn't affect the relationship between us and everything was good and dandy, I'm sure as hell not hanging out with them. I'm doing my therapy sessions and then I want you to get out of my face. We're not muddying the relationship by becoming friends. There are literally ethical guidelines against that because it's a problem. Now, we knew Jodi was weird, but living with your clients is a whole new level of fucking weird. But it gets weirder, don't worry. Ruby gets jealous. Sounded a little bit like a crush to me. And somehow Jodi ends up moving in with them. Now, during this time, it's said that Jodi has a lot of violent outbursts and she's seeing like these dark visions and has Ruby comforting her, which is like, wait, I thought she was y'all's therapist, but you're providing emotional support to her? How the fuck does that make sense? During this time, Jodi's getting all these dark visions, specifically at night. So Ruby is having to go check on her. Now, at first, she's checking on her like once a night, and then it's getting more frequent. She's checking on her every 3 hours, every 2 hours, every hour. And it gets to the point where Ruby thinks, you know what? She's having such a hard time that I'm just going to sleep in the bed with her. You heard me right. Ruby decides to start sleeping in bed with Jodi.
Started like every 4 hours at night, and then it moved every 2 hours at night, then it moved every hour at night, and then at some point Ruby said, you know what, I'm just going to start sleeping in there. And if I need you, I'll come down and get you. I'm like, that's kind of weird, but okay. And that was that. They started sleeping in the same bed.
I'm not a Kevin sympathizer by any means, but can you imagine how freaking weird it is to have your therapist move in with you and then all of a sudden your wife is sleeping in the same bed as your therapist? And then after that, they started dictating everything he did, like told him when and where to go, what to do, all this crap. And it's just, what? There's a lot more to that interview that I can go into in another video, but I just thought that that was really the nail on the coffin for all the rumors that they were romantically involved. Obviously, I have to say allegedly, but like, girl, she lived in a house with her husband and is sleeping in bed with the therapist. That's all for this update because I gotta go to bed. Bye. I really just hope those kids find a new home somewhere where they can be filled with love and peace and get the therapy that they will definitely need after this and just live a beautiful life. I hope that their family stays away from them. I think Kevin is disgusting. I think obviously Ruby and Jodi are fucking horrendous. I think Ruby's parents are disgusting for supporting her still. I just hope and pray that the kids get everything they need in life and more and can get as far away from the situation as possible. And I also hope that Ruby and Jodi don't get something stupid like 4 years, because typically if it's good behavior, they'll serve even less than that. And when it comes to child crimes, more often than not, they have good behavior in prison because there's no children to mistreat. I just hope the justice system handles this accordingly and she rots in prison, both of them. I hope they both rot in prison. I hope Kevin rots somewhere else. It's just really sad. It's really sad. It's just all bad. So that's about it. Like I said, make sure to listen to my music. I need you now more than ever. And let me know anything else you want me to talk about. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Picked up a paintbrush, been painting all day. All of my colors are fading to